All right, so now we are going to look at oil pastels. So my oil pastel packs look like this. This is the brand that we're using. And then this just slides inside of it. There's a number on the side that will coincide with your pouch number. I wrote on the board the colors that you should have, but basically red, orange, yellow, rainbow colors, light green, light blue, dark blue, and then your normal neutrals. So you should have 16 colors in there. Oil pastels are pigment plus binder, just like all of our materials from here on out. The binder is going to be oil and wax. So the higher quality ones are going to have more pigment and more oil. The lower quality ones are going to have more wax. And what will happen if you have more wax is that it'll just pick up. Instead of blending together nicely, you'll pick up color and you'll not be able to blend as well. Oil pastels look and feel a lot like crayons, except that they're oily and they're blendable. So we're going to start by making our value scale. We don't need to go over the color and values and stuff again because we did that in the chalk pastel. If you need a refresher, please go watch the chalk pastel video, the beginning. So if your pastels are looking a little worse for wear, you can take a scrap piece of paper and just clean it off because you do want it to be pretty clean. Otherwise, you're going to be blending color in. So I'm going to start with my white. I'll lay my white down. I'm not pushing terribly hard. Let's go ahead and say I'm going to do yellow. So just like with my chalk pastels, I'm going to choose analogous colors. I'm going to slightly overlap. So right now I'm working in the base layer. That base layer is just going to build up the oil so that I have something to blend with. And instead of using purple for this, I'm going to go in with the dark, with the blue. I've noticed with the pastels that the dark, that the purple is not quite dark. It's more of a lavender, less of a purple. We're going to create the purple this way. Okay, now I'm just going to go back in. I'm going to use the pastel itself to blend. Because we're building up the oil. And so we're making it so that it can become more fluid. So a lot of people will want to use their oil pastels and color with them like you color with crayons and then blend them with their fingers. But that looks really scraggly, for lack of a better term. but I do want you to try. So over here, I want you to do the same thing with your value scale, but don't push hard. Don't turn it to that nice fluid oil. It's giving candy corn vibes right now. So I've got all the same colors in the same order, but then I'm going to take my finger and blend. You see how kind of messy this looks? It's not a good look. My fingers still had oil pastel on, or chalk pastel on them from earlier today, so I got a little chalk pastel in there. Can you do it this way? Yeah, but it just doesn't look quite as good as when you're doing it with the blending with the oil. I never quite went in with the yellow, so let me add a little bit more yellow just to make that a little bit more vibrant. Okay, so we will label this blending with pastel. We'll label this blending with finger. And we're going to have one more that we're going to do right here. This is an interesting effect that you can do with oil pastels that you can't quite do with other materials. So I'm going to use those same colors. I'm going to basically start with this all over again. So traditionally I'll pull the lightest color into the darker color, and that'll be how I'm blending. So I didn't pull the orange into the yellow, I pulled the yellow into the orange, and now I'm going to pull the orange into the red and go back with the yellow. I'm sorry. Yeah, back with the yellow into the orange. That'll just kind of keep it from getting too dark. So I'm gonna put a little bit more orange. Now I'm going to add some red, pull the red into the blue. And then because I don't have anywhere to go with the blue, I'm going to have to just put the blue here and pull it into the purple. Okay, so I've got my colors down. So this is a cap of baby oil. This is a Q-tip. I can take my Q-tip and dip it in the oil. I'm going to start on the white end. You can do this with a paintbrush too. And just start kind of liquefying it. And it's going to make it more painterly. If you have a paintbrush, or I'm sorry, if you have a sketchbook that has thinner pages, that's not the mixed media pages, you should do this on a separate sheet of paper because it will bleed through your paper. Notice how I'm turning my Q-tip every little bit so I have a clean side to do it on. Okay, so that'll give you more of a painterly look. And like I said, you can use a paintbrush too. I just had a Q-tip on hand. Be careful not to use too much. You can see I barely put any in there, and that was enough to do this whole value scale. So that made it more liquidy. So I'm going to go ahead and label this one blending with oil. Okay, so some cool things that you can do with your chalk pastel, just like with your oil pastel, you can use the tip. I'm sorry, just like with your chalk pastel. You can use the tip or you can use the side. Just like before, you can do those fun little motions with your pastel. But what makes oil pastel really cool is something called sgraffito. So I can color in, I'm going to color really hard a value. Let's do 2. I'm going to make this little value blendy thing here. And then I'm going to take another color that's usually darker, and I'm going to color on top. So I'm just going to grab black because that is going to be my darker color. You can choose any color, really. And then I'm going to take a paper clip, a mechanical pencil that doesn't have the lead sticking out, anything, and scrape away through that first layer of black, and it'll show the color underneath. So we do this in clay all the time. Let me see if I can get that to be brighter so you can see it. We do this in clay all the time. Like I said, it's called sgraffito. So this would be really good if you're making like a hair texture, like if you're doing an animal, wood texture. So we're going to write sgraffito. Okay, all right, and then just like with chalk pastels, we are going to layer, layer, layer. Always 3 colors in every area. It's actually called the rule of 3s. All right, so we've got our value scales down. So now we're going to do, you're right, shapes. So I'm actually going to do 2 shapes, but I'm going to overlap them. And I want you to make these kind of big. So if you don't have room on your paper, do another piece of paper. So I'm going to do my cylinder and my sphere. You don't have to choose cylinder or sphere, but I'm going to do them overlapping. So I got my light source here. It's going to hit here and here. My sphere is going to be in front of my cylinder. That's why it's overlapped in front. I'm going to go in with my white where the highlight's going to be. And I think that my sphere is going to be red and pink. So I'm going to go and just start building up my pink layers. We don't want to destroy that tooth, so don't push really hard until you get to where you're pretty confident that you have all the colors that you need. Otherwise, it'll just slide right off. You won't be able to put any more colors on. So I've got my pink. So I'm actually going to go from pink to red. And then I'll go with some purple. These oil pastels have seen better days, so it's totally fine if you need to peel the paper off, if you need to break them, whatever you need to do. It's no big deal. I'm going to go with my purple. And then I think I'm even going to take some blue and put it in for the core shadow. So now is the fun part of blending. So I'm going to go back in with my white, start blending out into the pink. So oil pastels were actually developed by painters who wanted to have paint that they could take out into the field and paint. It's called plein air, so like out in the open. But they didn't want to bring all of their paints with them. So they developed these oil pastel sticks as a way to like easily transport their oil paint. So when I say that they are like paint, I'm being serious. Just slowly working my way down the sphere. If you make a mistake with oil pastels, you can't really erase, but you can kind of go in and use your fingernail to scratch it away. You just have to be gentle, because if you scratch too much, you're going to destroy the tooth, and you won't be able to fix it once you scratch it. All right, so I have my sphere. Now I need to go in for my shadow. I am going to draw my shadow out like this. And for now, I'm just going to forget the fact that the shadow is also going to be on the cylinder. I'm just going to put it down here. And because I just used my darkest color for the shadow, let's see if I can get some purple in here. Or some blue to darken it up. Yeah, that worked okay. You can add the tiniest hint of black if you feel like you need to make the shadow stand out as being different from your pastel or from your sphere. I would not go crazy with that though. Time to blend. Okay, so my cylinder, I'm going to make, I think I'm going to make it some greens. Okay, so we'll still have our highlight. Now the reason why I made this overlap is so that we can get a little bit of an extra challenge in here. And that extra challenge is we don't want to pull the pink into the cylinder, because if we do, it's going to make our colors look real muddy and we're not going to have the clear defined lines like you want. So we do have to be pretty careful. I'm going to grab some of my light green and pull it into the white because I don't really need that to stay stark white. And then grab my light green and pull it into the dark green. Dark green's just going to clean it up a little bit. So there's an instance of me messing up, going outside of the line. So I'm just going to make my cylinder a little wider. And then for the top, I am actually, cylinders kind of befuddle me. It's always kind of difficult to make the top of the cylinder look realistic. I'm going to just make it light, do a little bit of dark green, and then just go back in with my white to blend it all together. Okay, so I got a little bit of a shadow here. We want to get that off. I don't know where that came from. Go and darken it back up. I don't want to take my, see, I dropped a little bit of oil pastel. I don't want to like smush it away. I want to very lightly brush it away. Okay, so now we are getting ready to do shadows. So I'm going to take my blue. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the sphere shadow on here. And then we're going to do the cylinder shadow as well. We'll get that purple in there. And then something we never really had to worry about with black and white is that the color of your object is going to be visible in your shadow as well. So my object is green, so I'm going to take a little bit of this green because it's going to be reflected back into the shadow, back onto the object, I mean. So when you're using oil pastels, We are not leaving the pastels scrappy looking. They're all going to be layered and they're always going to be blended. It's just a matter of how you blend them. You're going to blend with the pastels, blend with oil, or blend with your finger. If you are blending with your finger or a Q-tip, just make sure you have to work extra hard not to make it look really muddy. For this, what I would do to fix this is I would scratch away as much as I can. Then I would just add a background. Because this is just for a sketchbook skill builder, I'm not too worried about that. What I'm going to be looking for when I'm grading this is I'm going to be looking for a smooth gradation of your value, an obvious light source, that they're overlapping, and that the shadows are on the other object. So your shadow for this is on this. Do you see how it kind of finishes the shape? So here's rounded and then it goes rounded again. That's what you want to look for. Okay, so just like with the chalk pastels, we're going to do some application before we move on. So we have our three-dimensional shapes, but we need to make them be more applicable for real life. So I want you to do this on a separate sheet of paper because I want you to make it bigger. I'm going to do it on here. So we're going to draw an, I was going to do an apple. We'll do an apple. We can do a pumpkin or something later. So I'm going to draw the shape of an apple. An apple is not a sphere. Do that color. And then I'm going to take my green and I'm going to go ahead and start layering in some of the greens. I just realized that I had an apple that we can use as a drawing reference. Do you see these like light colors right around here? I'm taking my green, I'm going to add those in. I'm going to add some yellow. Right here in the middle, it's kind of orangey. I'm going to go in lightly with my orange. Kind of overlapping the green a little bit. I think a lot of times when people are doing things that they know for sure are one color, they're a little afraid to add in the quote unquote weird colors. So if I told you to draw an apple, your first color that you went for wouldn't be orange. But there is some orange in this apple. I'm going to come in with some red underneath. And we're darker on this side because my light is coming from my window over here. If I were thinking, I would have put some white down to make this highlight, but I wasn't. So. And now I can come in and add my colors again and keep blending. kind of a darker red up here. A little bit of a darker red over here. Okay, so I have my apple colors, but I don't have the shading yet. So down here you can see it's pretty dark, and over here you can see it's pretty dark. So I can take and do blue. I'm going to go in just lightly, start adding in my shadows. So with color, so you know in math you have to learn how to add because you use adding for a lot of other stuff. So you really have to have that down before you do other things. It's very similar in art. You learn how to shade with value first, just using black and white, because it's very simple. And then you start adding in the darker things, or adding in the harder things, like adding color in, or adding in different light sources. So right now we're at kind of medium hardness, because we're just working on two things. I think my blue got a little bit too big for its britches there, so I'm going to go back in with the red and lighten that up a little bit. Once you have a lot of pastel built up, it can start to pill, where it's doing something similar to that. The best thing to do for that is just to kind of scrape them off and try to touch it up with the undercolor. For this one, I think I can get it taken care of here with the red. Let's put a little bit up here, because there's a little bump there. Okay, pretty good apple, I think. So I'm going to, I don't have a stem on my apple, but I'm going to go ahead and make a stem just so that it is very obviously an apple. So there's my putting in application. So we have not just the colors, we also have the shading to show that my apple, to show this guy here, is round. I might go ahead and take a little bit of this white over here just to lighten it a smidge. You don't want to do a ton of white over top of your colors because it'll get kind of ghosty. But I think that helped a little bit. We want it to blend in a little bit of these colors. Right now I'm actually using my white as a blending stick. So I'm not trying to lighten it, I'm just trying to help it blend. Just these lighter colors. Then I can go back over top of them. And of course I would need a shadow for this guy, so let me finish touching up these. So what I'm doing right now is the middle was looking a little scraggly, kind of like how this looks where you can see the paper through it. So I'm kind of going in and touching up areas where I think it needs to have a little bit more color, a little less paper showing through. Okay, and then shadow. Let's see. I think I'm going to make my shadow be blue. So my light is hitting this way, so my shadow is going to be pretty long. I'll put a little bit of purple in there. I'll put a little red. And honestly, I'll put a little black too. Then go in with my blue and start layering it all together, or blending it all together. If this was sitting on like a brown table, I would have incorporated more like browns. But since it's just an imaginary shadow, we'll keep it at that.